Okay, let's talk synovial joints. When's the last time you heard that? Probably never. Okay, synovial joints. So we are on slide 8. So play along. Look at slide number 8. And you'll see we have a synovial, pictures of synovial joints. We have the normal joint is the first one on the left side. And so what you're going to see is that the bones come close together, but there is a space in between. And we have a capsule around them. So a synovial joint consists of a synovial capsule, and it is filled with, what do you think? Yeah, synovial fluid. It's slippery stuff. And so it's different kinds of proteins, albumins, and hyaluronic acid. Now, a lot of people have arthritis in their knees. It's a common place. And one of the treatments that's used all the time now, I've had shots in both of my knees, and they call them the chicken shots. Now, I'm not talking cortisone here. This is this other stuff. It's the slippery stuff. It's like changing the oil in your knees. And in some people, myself included, it helps a lot. So what is the slippery stuff they put in there? It's one of the components of synovial fluid, hyaluronic acid. And they call it, but they don't call it hyaluronic acid, right? People just call them the chicken shots. They do. You know why? You know that red thing on the top of a chicken? It has a whole lot of that stuff. So people don't eat that part, right? So where they butcher chickens, they save that red thing, the comb, and then they extract the hyaluronic acid and put it in that shot, and they can charge your insurance company exorbitant amounts of money for it, but it works, so it's worth it, and people call them the chicken shots. And that's because it's basically replacing synovial fluid, or at least one of the components that's found in synovial fluid. And we had said, what is synovial fluid made of? Albumin and hyaluronic acid. Okay. What about the ends of the bones? We just had a test, right? We had talked about cartilage and bones, and we had talked about how you have the epiphyseal plate, that's cartilage. And then we said covering the ends of the bones, we have articular cartilage. So the bones come really close together and they're separated by the synovial fluid. Now, we have this capsule that is surrounding the joint capsule that is surrounding the joint, and it's keeping all that synovial fluid in there. And outside of it, though, we have something called a bursa. Yeah, and you may have heard of people saying they have bursitis, and I don't really know. It's a disorder. It's a disorder in the bursa. But the bursa is a place where you can kind of save up excess synovial fluid. But it's outside of that joint capsule. On our slides, we see osteoarthritis. That's just where the bones rub together. Not just. Trust me, it's not a just. I have osteoarthritis, an inflammatory form of osteoarthritis, and I can hardly walk at times, and I had my hip replaced, and so I'm back up and moving again, and both my knees. But it's where the bones rub together, and they damage each other. And so it helps me by adding that synovial fluid replacement, the hyaluronic acid. There's another kind of arthritis where your immune system attacks your joint. That is rheumatoid arthritis. It's an autoimmune disease. The other kind of arthritis involves it's gouty arthritis, and it involves uric acid crystals getting in there and chewing up the joint. So it's damage to the joints. That's what arthritis is. Okay, So we have these diarthroses. All of these freely movable joints are filled with synovial fluid and have this kind of a structure. Whereas before we were just saying it's cartilage, it's collagen, it's bone. Now we're saying it's really this really complex organization. One thing that you may not know, and everybody has heard of things like tendons and ligaments and things of that sort, but what's the difference? What is the difference in a tendon and a ligament? Well, it ends up, a ligament is a connection from bone to bone, and a ligament is a connection from muscle to bone. Okay, that was on the next slide, so I mentioned it. Let's see what we've got next. Okay, 6 minutes in. Okay, we can do it. We'll stay right here. All right, so we have different kinds of diarthroses, these synovial joints. And you have some joints. I have to use my left arm because my right arm is arthritic. But you can see I can move up, down, forwards, backwards, all different directions. I can move in, they call it 3 degrees of movement. You can move X, Y, and Z. I can move in all 3 directions. Now, how do I do that? It's a ball and socket joint. So it can rotate in any different direction because it's the head, like the head of the femur in the acetabulum or the head of the humerus in the glenoid fossa. So you have a huge degree of movement. Movement in all directions, in all axes. Okay, so we have the ball and socket joint. Then if we start at your fingers and you start working back, we're going to talk about all these other kinds of joints. So we have a condyloid joint, and it is represented by the connection between your proximal phalanx and the metacarpal. And so what it is, basically, it's a convex. So it's a sort of a convex shape. And so the convex part of one bone fits into the concave portion of another. And so that's what we call a condyloid joint. We then have saddle joints. And so remember those little carpals? Yeah, those little rocks. So the metacarpals come in contact with those carpals that are right there in your wrist, and they have like a little groove that they ride in. And so we call that a saddle joint. Okay. And then on the other side of those carpals, we have the radius and the ulna there, and we have what we call gliding joints, and these are where they're just 2 flat surfaces that come together and allow the bones, the carpals, to move against the distal ends of your ulna and your radius, right? Okay, here's the good one. It's the hinge joint. Remember that trochlear notch and the trochlea? It's like a U. The ulna has a U, right? Well, that is a hinge joint. And you know what? It only moves in one plane, right? So it's a monoaxial. So we had said this is a multiple axis movement in the ball and socket. This is a single way of moving in with the hinge joint. Okay, we had the final one is a pivot joint. Do you remember we said we have the axis has a Dens process, and on top of it you have the atlas that rotates from side to side, so you can say no, Well, that is a pivot joint. Okay, so these that we've just discussed, chapter or slide 10, and these are the different kinds of diarthroses, the synovial joints. Okay, we're coming down to the end.